Hi friends, welcome back. Today we are going to be making sourdough bread using all freshly ground whole wheat. I've been promising you these videos for a while. You've been asking for them. Now they are here. I am going to be walking you through over the next few weeks exactly the process of making several different types of bread using freshly ground flour. And last week we showed you all the different kinds of flour, or at least a lot of the different kinds of flour. I didn't show you every one because there's as many different varieties of wheat berries as there are like tomatoes. There's tons, but I use several and we walked through those last week, and I'll link that video down below along with the health benefits, why we're choosing to mill our own flour right now, and what we've noticed since we have. So today we're gonna do our first type of bread with whole wheat flour, and that is sourdough bread. I know a lot of you probably already have starters, a lot of you do this already, but it just adds an extra health dimension when you use your freshly ground flour. The problem with freshly ground flour is that it doesn't always turn out as lovely and beautiful as those big billowy poofy loaves. And there's a couple of things we can do to mitigate that, and we'll talk about that as we go. But first of all, I just want to temper your expectations a little bit. It's going to be not quite as poofy as your regular sourdough loaf. That's why some people use half freshly ground flour and half regular flour so they can get that. The other thing that you can do is you can use vital wheat gluten. You can use a little bit of this vital wheat gluten when you're making your sourdough bread, and that will add some strength and structure to it. I am not going to, however, we like it just fine, like it is, like this recipe is. So we're just gonna make it. And if you're concerned about it being beautiful and billowy, you can try some of those other things. So let's talk about my mill for a minute. I have a Mock Mill 200 and I love it, but it was a bit of an investment. It's been a worthwhile investment for me. I was using the Mock Mill KitchenAid attachment because I just had already had that and it worked just fine. And so the only reason that I upgraded, the biggest reason, was because this one is like insanely lots faster. And where I would sit and I would dump the wheat berries in and I would just go off for 45 minutes and let it like do something else while they ground, this one does it so fast. I mean, you know, I'll dump this in and within 2 minutes we'll have a whole thing of flour. It makes it much more usable on a daily basis. However, this is not an investment to make unless you know that you're going to be milling on a daily basis. And there's a couple of versions of the Mock Mill. I didn't get the big fancy pretty one because really the wooden one, the biggest difference is that it's just prettier. I don't care. I got the faster one. There's also a Mock Mill 100 and it's half the speed, but it's also quite a bit cheaper. So you can decide what's important for you. For me, when I was deciding on what kind of mill, the thing that was most important was that I knew to keep up with this habit of daily bread making, it couldn't be this 3-hour chore. It needed to be a quick thing I could make and I could build into my morning routine that would just go and be done. So for that reason, I went ahead and invested in this. There are tons of grain mills out there. This is the one I have experience with. This is the one that had really great reviews. It has a stone grinder on the inside, but that's the one we use. So to start off this sourdough recipe, you wanna make sure that you have fed your sourdough starter 4 to 12 hours before this and it's nice and bubbly. And yes, you can feed your sourdough starter whole grain. So I like to feed my sourdough starter a 1 to 2 to 2 ratio. Some people do a 1 to 1 to 1, and that's starter to flour to water, and that's in weight. So, but you can do lots of different things. Some people just eyeball it. It's not real persnickety, but find what works best for you. If you already make sourdough, then likely you already have a routine. So let's go ahead and let's grind the wheat berries. For this recipe, it's going to call for 7 cups of ground flour. That means that I'm going to use about 4 2/3 cup of wheat berries. Now, these are Einkorn. we really love the flavor of einkorn. In this recipe, you can also use hard white wheat. You don't want to use one of the soft varieties because they really don't have the structure necessary for rising bread. So I'm going to turn the mock mill on, and then we'll just dump these in. And as you can see, it just comes right on out, and it's a nice, beautiful, fine flour. And there we have it. It was about 2 minutes, and we have beautiful, light, fluffy flour. And that's for a huge, like seven cups is a huge quantity. Normally it would take half that time because we would be doing half that flour. So I should mention before we start, this is a recipe I got from Farmhouse on a Boon. I'm gonna edit it slightly because I am allergic to coconuts, so I'm using olive oil instead of coconut oil. But I will link her original recipe down in the comments. Just know I'm substituting out olive oil instead of coconut oil. So it's likely you've seen all of the sourdough craze and you're wondering what it's about. The deal is that the yeast that you use in the sourdough pre-digests the bread. And so it has a lot of prebiotic and probiotic properties. The probiotic properties get cooked out, get heated and killed, but the prebiotic properties stay there, which makes the bread a lot easier to digest, a lot more nutritious for you. So when you add in the health benefits of that to the whole wheat flour, which is already way more nutritionally dense, this is just like a superfood. So we like it. However, it's not the only kind of bread I make because it is so time intensive and it takes a lot of planning. Sometimes you just wake up and you're like, we're out of bread, we need the bread. And so that's why I have other breads in my rotation. But the sourdough bread really is just this powerhouse of health, and is a really good one to learn and to master. So first, you're gonna take 1 cup of your starter that you've fed 4 to 12 hours ago, and it's nice and bubbly and oozy, and you're gonna put it in here. Then we're gonna add 1.5 cups of filtered water. Now the reason we use filtered water for this is because you're trying to cultivate as many of those cultures in your starter as you can, and sometimes the yeast, the bacteria in the yeast gets killed by some of the additions in our tap water. We've got chlorine and fluoride and things like that. You want to encourage growth in these bacteria that are in your flour instead of killing some of them off. So we're gonna go ahead and use filtered water, 1.5 cups. I'm gonna use 1/2 cup of olive oil. Half a cup of honey. I'm gonna stir this up just enough to get that incorporated a little. And then I'm gonna add half the flour, about 3 cups initially. And I want to stir this up. You can use your hands, you can use a spoon. This is one of those bread whisks. One of the things that I've learned is that there are a ton of gimmicky things that you can buy for sourdough making and things. You really don't need any of them. I mean, you really can get by with your hands and a pan for the stove. So we're gonna get this nice and incorporated. Then I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of salt. I really like to use the Redmond's real salt. And stir it in. Then I'm gonna add 3 more cups of this flour we ground. You can add it all at once, the flour, but it is just far easier to get it all incorporated together if you add it a little bit at a time. And this is gonna be pretty sticky, so you can add as you go this more flour. And now I'm gonna start getting my hands dirty and actually knead this with my hands for a little while. About 5 minutes is usually good, but it is gonna be pretty sticky, so keep adding that flour as you need to. And you can use a stand mixer for this. I read one time something that really made me value this time kneading, and it was talking about how one of the traditions that women of old used to have when they made their bread was that they would make it, and as they were making their bread, as they were going through that kneading time, that just was this time they had to just stand and work and do mindless stuff, they would actually take that time to spend concentrated time in their prayer for each of their family and friends by name personally, and really think about them and treasure them. And I just thought that was such a special sentiment. You know, how often in our busy worlds do we just run, and we lose track sometimes of slowing down and forcing that time to really concentrate on what we're thankful for. And that really impacted me and made me really enjoy spending this time, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, kneading and spending that quiet time in reflection. So that's really mostly why I don't pull out the big stand mixer. I love this time. Now, there are days where I'm in a hurry and I put my bread in the bread machine and I just go, but I really value this time, and it really has been a great way to remind myself of all the blessings in my life. So there it is. You can see all kneaded up beautifully after 5 minutes. The next step is really easy. You're going to take a wet cloth and lay it over the top, or you can use saran wrap. The idea is that you want to keep the moisture trapped in here. The bread can vary slightly depending on your humidity outside and things like that. So you just want to make sure that we keep it nice and moist. And we're just going to let this set for 20 minutes. This is going to allow the moisture to fully incorporate into that wheat, and it's called the autolyse. And then I'll see you back here in 20 minutes and we will start our stretch and folds. All right, it has been 20 minutes and now we're going to do our stretch and folds. This is just a way, there's different ways to knead this, but this is the way that I like to do it. So you're going to take your bread and you're going to do this a couple times. You're going to take the corner of it and just pull it up and pull it over, tuck it over. And you're going to do this from every side, okay? Take the other corner, so it'll be 4 times total, pull it up and tuck it under. Take this side and pull it up and tuck it under. And as you go, as we do these stretches and folds, it's going to get a lot easier. They're going to stay. Pull it up and tuck it under. Now I'm going to put this wet cloth back over. We're going to do 6 of these total. 3 of them we're going to do 15 minutes apart. And so that was the first one. And then the next 2, 15 minutes apart. And then we're going to do 3, 30 minutes apart. So I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes and see you back here. All right, second stretch and fold. We're going to take each side. The first side, I'm going to pull it up. Then I'm going to tuck it up under. And the next side. And this is just strengthening those gluten strands in here. Tuck it under. And then the last side. Tuck it under. And see you back here in 15 minutes. Okay, another 15 minutes down. Here we go. I'm going to take one side, pull it up, over, the next side, and pull it up, and over, 4, 3, and 4. Now the time increases. We're gonna let it set for 30 minutes at a time, and we're gonna do this 3 more times. All right, the first of our stretch and folds after 30 minutes. And I can already tell this is already starting to get more of the gluten strands forming. It's stretchier, it breaks less easy. So there's 1, and that's what you want. See how it's stretching further before it breaks? 2. 3. And 4. Now we're gonna let this set. See you back in 30 minutes. Just 2 more to go. All right, now that we have done this, we have our nice little ball. We are gonna put this in a warm place for the next 8 hours. And you wanna keep this covered with your wet towel or your saran wrap because you still are wanting to keep that moisture in. It's winter here, so it's cool in the kitchen and dough doesn't rise very well, so I'm gonna use the bread proofing setting on my oven. If your oven doesn't have a bread proofing setting, you can set it on top of your fridge. I can't set it on top of my fridge. You can see we've got cabinets that the fridge is set up in, but I know a lot of people do that. You can put it inside your microwave just to keep it draft free. It's just anywhere that you can keep it as warm as possible. You don't want to keep it hot, but if you keep it above 75 degrees or 80, then it's going to double a lot quicker. Just if it's colder, it might take a little longer to double. So let's put this in a nice warm place, and then I will see you back here in probably about 8 hours after this has doubled in size. All right, so we've been rising for about 8 hours, and it looks like we have doubled in size, which is great. So we're gonna take this out of here. Now I wanna be really careful. I don't wanna squish the bubbles, those precious bubbles. I don't wanna lose any of that aeration. And I'm just gonna cut this in half with a bread knife. And I have this on a floured surface, and I'm using rice flour, but you can use whatever. And I just wanna add some tension to this. So I'm gonna pull this around and shape it into a ball form. I'm gonna take my little knife, I'm gonna pull this under. I'm gonna add tension to these loaves. Now I'm gonna bake a round loaf like this, but if you're putting it in a pan, you just wanna match the shape of your pan when you're doing this shaping process. And you can pull that towards you to add a little bit of tension here. There are far more elegant sourdough shapers and artists than I, but here we go, we get the job done. And I'm gonna let these set for about 20 minutes to just kind of rest and hold their shape. And then we are gonna put them in a couple of bannetons. Okay, it's been 20 minutes, and now I'm gonna take my 2 bannetons. You do not have to use a banneton. You can use a bowl or anything that's in the shape of what you're gonna put it in. And so I'm gonna use these bannetons. And I went ahead and I put some rice flour in them. And I'm going to pick up my loaf, and I'm gonna put it top down in here, and I'm gonna stitch together the loaf, which means I'm gonna kind of pinch the edges together, and that just adds a little bit of tightness down here in the banneton. Just tightens the top, okay? Okay, and again, I'm gonna stitch this together to add a little bit more tension here. Now, I'm gonna cover these with plastic wrap so that they're airtight. And then I'm gonna put them in the fridge overnight for 12 to 14 hours. So this is called the bulk ferment. Once those come out of the fridge, I will see you back here we will talk about how to bake them and how to score them and all that fun stuff. So, all right, our bulk ferment is done. And now we are going to do the actual baking. I'm going to bake mine in a Dutch oven, so I'm going to walk you through how to do that, but you can bake it in whatever you have, even a cookie sheet. But for the Dutch oven, I'm going to preheat this Dutch oven with the oven. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this in there. Now, I really like, first of all, this Dutch oven I love. There's some super duper expensive ones, but this Lodge one is an enamel Dutch oven, and it's lasted years and years, and it's wonderful, and I love it. I was struggling at first when I started sourdough bread with having a super, like, not burned bottom, but a tough bottom, almost burned, really too brown. And one of the things I read said to take these little, you know, you could get these little clear rocks that are meant for floral arranging and stuff, and you can put these in the bottom, these glass beads, in a flat layer on the bottom of your Dutch oven. And what this does is it absorbs some of the heat and it distributes it evenly. So I really, since I've done this, have not had a problem with the bottom of my sourdough burning. And because we're gonna put the sourdough bread in there on parchment paper, we don't have to worry about the bread sitting right on top of those glass beads. So I'm gonna cover that up. And I'm going to stick it in the oven to preheat at 400 degrees. Now, as soon as that is preheated, I want to go ahead and I'm going to lower this into the Dutch oven, but let's get it prepared to go. So I'm going to take my bread out of my banneton here, and you can give it a little more of a shape if you want. All right, so now I'm going to score this, and I have this little razor blade scorer thing. You can score with a knife or whatever. This just allows some places for it to expand. I'm going to put one deep score. You can score, there's a zillion trillion different ways to score this bread. And I know there are like way fancier scorers than me. I am not an artistic scorer at all. There are some beautiful sourdough breads here. And that's just gonna be, when the bread poofs up, it's going to come apart at these, this one's deeper, so it's gonna make like this ear where it comes apart. But once the oven is preheated, I'm gonna lower this down into the Dutch oven. So now as soon as that Dutch oven is preheated, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna lower it down in and leave the parchment paper. And I'm going to cook this covered in the Dutch oven for 20 minutes. Then I'm gonna uncover the Dutch oven and I'm gonna cook it for 20 more minutes uncovered. And then I will see you back here with my finished loaf. And there we go, one delicious loaf of sourdough. We absolutely love this recipe. It makes a nice tangy loaf. The einkorn gives it a really delicious flavor, and even though it doesn't get quite as poofy as some of those designer loaves that you see with the fancy bread flour, this really isn't dense. It's not super chewy or anything. It really does have a great texture on the inside. I hope that you have enjoyed this milled flour journey with us. And over the next several weeks, we are going to be doing all sorts of recipes with freshly milled flour, from cookies to breads to even cornbread. So if you are interested in that, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you get notified when we put out new videos. Thank you so much for joining us.